Hi, good morning. So today what I'd like you to do is to have a look at this essay question. If you get this sort of essay question in an exam, it's an absolute gift because it's got some really clear and easy to follow arguments. So the essay question is to the United Kingdom now has a multi-party system. Analyse and evaluate this statement. So this is a 25 mark question. Obviously what you've got to do then, hold on a minute, let's move on to the next slide. How to break this down. So obviously you need to write an introduction to begin with, and really in our introduction what we're looking to do is we're looking to use that as an opportunity to define some of the key terms. So what do we actually mean by a multi-party system? Well, what we mean is that Parliament, government, specifically government really, are made up of multiple parties, or we have a political system where multiple parties can access power and they can be in power. And as we've talked about over the last few weeks and looked at different political parties, what we in essence have is the two major political parties in the Conservatives and the Labour Party. And really what's happened over the last few years is the last sort of 30, 40 years, we've had an increase in a third party through the Liberal Democrats. But since 2000, really, we've had an increase in third parties such as the SNP, such as Plaid Cymru, such as the Green Party, Brexit, UKIP before them. And the rise in those parties has basically led to this debate to say, are we now a multi-party system? So I would very much sort of define that term to start off with, okay? And really the brief outline of why this is an argument is, as I've just said, there has been a rise in other parties. So certainly before 2000, we might have argued quite confidently that Britain has a two-party system, in that it is only really the Labour Party and the Conservatives who are ever forming a government. And so we would say that they are a two-party system. Some governments around the world, you would argue they are a single-party system because one party dominates. So it's always the same political party in power, whatever happens during a general election. You could argue that Conservatives have traditionally been the party of government, and so there has been some debate around that, and that might form some of your arguments later on in the essay. But just giving a brief outline of the term, what multi-party system means, and a little bit about this is opposed to a dominant party system or a two-party system. Okay. Then what you need to do is basically just give a brief outline of the points that you're going to talk about and just a brief judgment. So, for example, in this essay, we will discuss and then talk about a couple of things you might discuss, and then you might say, by the end of this essay, we will reach the judgment that indeed the UK does have a multi-party system, or alternatively, you say, however, we think that that it is actually still a two-party system. Okay. So that introduction should be around about a paragraph long, shouldn't take up too much time, should just get you straight into your writing. And then it's very simple in terms of giving a clear structure around this essay, because this essay is essentially a for and against. Yes, it is a multi-party system. No, it is not a multi-party system. So where do we get our evidence from to suggest that yes, it is actually a multi-party system? So use your mobile phones or go and get a laptop from Miss Towers Warner. And what you want to do is you want to see if you can look at the general election trends over the last few elections, because that's what forms your evidence. And your main piece of evidence to say that actually we've got a multi-party system is the 2010 election and the 2017. So a reminder, in 2010, the coalition was where there was a hung parliament. The Conservatives had the most seats. They joined with the Liberal Democrats. The Liberal Democrats formed a coalition with them, and so you would say this is evidence of a multi-party system because you essentially have multiple parties in power. In 2017, you remember Theresa May, there was a hung parliament, so she did not have a majority. She was 10 seats short, and what she did was a deal with the DUP. So the DUP basically topped up the Conservative vote for that period of time to allow the government to run effectively. And again, even though it wasn't a formal coalition, you would say that there was an agreement, and you could argue that the reliance on another party lends to the debate that it is a multi-party system. I think the question doesn't necessarily talk about general elections, and this is where you need to now talk about devolved assemblies. So certainly in Scotland, in Northern Ireland and in Wales, all of these devolved parliaments have multiple parties in power who have had power. SNP are the major party, but certainly in Wales you've got Plaid Cymru and Labour. They are all, again, I would look at those the makeup of those parliaments and see how they who runs those parliaments, essentially how power is shared amongst those three devolved parliaments. And your analysis here is really because they all use a proportional representation system or a form of PR. So, for example, STV in Ireland and the additional members system that you remember is a hybrid system that they use in Scotland, but it has obviously led to more parties being able to enter Parliament there. The other argument you could talk about in terms of a multi-party system is the factionalised nature of the two major political parties. Certainly a good example here would be around the Conservatives. The European Research Group, the ERG, and One Nation Conservatives have meant that the party has kind of has a large political spectrum there. Similarly with Labour, over the years, there has been that traditional socialist side of the party and a more modernising side of the party that has formed the centre ground. But what's happened is by factionalising the party, people feel that they've lost those traditional values of voting for those parties, and actually they've moved away from them because they don't feel represented. So many traditional Labour voters have moved away from the Labour Party because they feel they've gone too far to the centre. And they've opted to other political parties. But again, have a look at the evidence of the general elections to see where that kind of fits in. We've spoken about this at great depth, but really, a major player around this debate is the rise of the third parties. So in 2015, 33% of the electorate voted for other political parties. They voted away from the major two parties. And although that went back in 2017, it's still a fairly substantial number of voters who voted for that. 2017 might be a little bit of an outlier in 2019 because of Brexit, but certainly 2015 is a very good example to use. And we see this with UKIP, followed by Brexit, and how they've dominated the political argument for a number of general elections because people didn't feel the two major political parties backed up what they wanted. Certainly the Green Party have risen in terms of their support because of the environmental issues and the what they would say is a more common sense approach to the economy, and people feel that they are representing their views that the two major political parties are no longer capable of doing. You then add to that other third party element about national parties. Certainly Plaid Cymru and the SNP, they have obviously increased in terms of their popularity because of devolved parliaments. You could talk about the debate around the 2014 independence referendum in Scotland, and how it remained part of the UK, but actually what that meant is that 2015 lots of people went and voted for the SNP almost as a bit of a protest and away from the main two political parties. Again, look at the statistics to use for examples. And then arguments against, so that's a nice sort of swing it back to talk about the arguments against the multi-party system. And actually, when you look at it, and you look at who's formed government over the last 50 years or so, it still remains the two major political parties. If you look at each in turn, it's very clear that they remain dominant. The next general election coming up is highly likely to be a Labour government. Again, the third parties might not get a say. And so we only have really these two governments, these two parties forming a government. Even in the coalition and the agreement with the DUP in 2017, the Conservatives were clearly the dominant party. The Liberal Democrats really were there to top up the vote really more than anything else, and didn't have as big an influence as the Conservatives did. The other argument that you could talk to, which I alluded to earlier in the video, was around the Conservatives. There has been an argument, certainly pre-1997, that the Conservatives were the natural party of government, because statistically they have held government for the longest period of time. And certainly if you took Blair away, no Labour leader has won multiple general elections, certainly not one after the other. And that 13-year period between 97 and 2010, if you took that out of the way, actually the Labour Party haven't held power for a significant period of time. So that's an argument that you might want to suggest. But really, the main thing about this is the analysis. And the analysis is, why do we still think it is a two-party system? Well, we still think it's a two-party system, largely because of the electoral system. And that's your analysis. And that's the deep argument that fits into this debate, is because of the nature of our voting system, it's nigh on impossible for the smaller parties to form a government, and certainly form a coalition. We know that first past the post gives a winner's bonus. Now you only need around 44% of the major vote, and you'll have around 60% of the seats in Parliament. Certainly, the Liberal Democrats, the 2010 coalition, is a bit of a one-off. It's a bit of an anomaly in there. So certainly you need to bring that into the debate. That's where you're going to get a lot of your analysis from. And then finally, your conclusion really is about bringing the whole thing together, giving a couple of discussion points about the main arguments. So, this essay looked at whether it was a multi-party system. We looked at the role of third parties and how they've risen, etc., etc., etc. And then just include a judgment, include a comment with your judgment. I believe that Britain remains a two-party system because only the two major political parties can form government. Okay, for example. Okay, so you conclude it up, and you're looking around that. So you're probably looking for around about a paragraph for your introduction, around about a paragraph for your conclusion, and then you're probably looking, if you can, to have 3, maybe 4 paragraphs where you're outlining and analysing those main arguments. In an exam, you're going to have around about 40 minutes to do this question. What I'd like you to do is obviously watch this video, look at the slides, use your devices to look at the evidence there. The evidence is key in terms of the percentages of votes, the number of seats. That's important. That's what drives the argument through that evidence. Okay, and then it's around about 40 minutes of writing to kind of get this done. Okay. Yeah, any problems, just come and see me at another point. But I think this is a really nice essay to be successful at.